People expected Traoré's group to come back to Ouagadougou, but hours went by and the leader from Burkina Faso was still missing. The security team got ready. Other countries' spy agencies started thinking he might have been killed. But when Traoré showed up 24 hours later, he was smiling. He told his helper not to worry. He said he had just signed a deal that would change everything. The day started normally. Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, was supposed to check on farming projects in the eastern parts of the country. His group, with 3 armored cars and guards, left the capital early in the morning. They did this to avoid the hot midday sun and any dangers. Colonel Amara Konate, who was in charge of the president's security, made sure everything was ready. The road was safe. Local leaders knew what was happening, and they had taken steps to prevent spying. It was a typical day for the president in a place where safety was always a concern. By the afternoon, the group was expected to head back to Ouagadougou. The president's office had already prepared a press release to show Traoré's dedication to helping farmers and making sure there was enough food. He also had a meeting planned with military leaders that evening. But as the afternoon turned into evening, people at the presidential palace started to worry. No one had heard from Traoré or his group since their last check-in at 11:32 a.m. Near Kuncher village, Konate told the communications officer to try again, staying calm even though he was getting more worried. He said to use all channels and top priority. The answer was the same as it had been for the past hour. Nothing. By 8 p.m., what started as a worry became a big security problem. Konate started the emergency plans for the president, sending out special teams to retrace the group's path. He kept the situation a complete secret. If news got out that Burkina Faso's president was missing, the whole region's stability could be at risk. Konate told his assistants not to talk to foreign agencies. He said it was an internal matter until they knew more. However, Konate couldn't stop foreign spy agencies from noticing. In today's world, when a president's group suddenly stops moving, it usually gets noticed quickly. In Paris, at the main office of DGSE, France's Foreign Intelligence Service, an analyst named Sophie Mercier saw something strange while looking at satellite images of West Africa. Traoré's group stopped here, she told her boss, pointing to a spot on the digital map near Burkina Faso's eastern border with Niger. They changed their route about 30 minutes earlier, then stopped in this remote area. No movement for the past 4 hours. Her boss looked at the images with more and more interest. Ibrahim Traoré had been a problem for France in the area because he wanted his country to control its own resources, and he reduced France's military presence. Any trouble with his leadership needed close attention. Watch all communications from Burkina Faso's military and government and get me a clearer picture of that place, he ordered. Similar things happened in spy centers, from Washington to Beijing. Every major country with interests in Africa's resource-rich Sahel region suddenly became aware of the unusual disappearance of one of its most important leaders. As midnight came in Ouagadougou, the presidential palace became a crisis center. Military leaders, spy officials, and important ministers met in a secure room. Their faces were serious as Colonel Konate gave his report. The group reached this point, he said, pointing to a map, before communication stopped. Our search teams found the vehicles here, safe and untouched, about 3 kilometers from the main road. No signs of an attack, no signs of a broken vehicle. And the president? Asked Defense Minister Zongo, saying what everyone was thinking. No trace, Konate replied. The security guards are also missing. No blood, no signs of a fight. It's as if they just walked away from the vehicles. Foreign Minister Ouedraogo leaned forward. Could this be an attempt to overthrow the government, or someone kidnapped him from another country? Konate shook his head. The vehicles were not forced off the road. They were purposely parked and secured. This suggests they planned to go somewhere else, not that they were attacked. By Traoré himself? Zongo asked, surprised. It seemed so, Konate confirmed. The main driver said the president personally told them to change the route and later told them to stop at that spot. He then told all the security guards to go with him on what he called a short but important detour. The room became quiet as they understood what this meant. Their president hadn't been kidnapped or killed. He had purposely gone off on his own. But why and where? This question spread beyond Burkina Faso's borders. By morning, spy agencies around the world were coming up with ideas and possibilities, each seen through the eyes of their own country's interests. In Langley, Virginia, CIA analysts thought Traoré might be trying to avoid being killed, pointing to recent information that suggested French mercenaries were involved in causing trouble in the region. In Beijing, officials from the Ministry of State Security wondered if he was secretly talking with Russian agents about mineral rights that China had been trying to get. In Moscow, SVR leaders wondered if Traoré was meeting with American officials, possibly hurting Russia's growing influence in the Sahel. The one thing no spy agency really thought about was the truth, something too unlikely to be part of their analysis. As a new day began in Ouagadougou, the presidential palace was still in crisis mode. Colonel Konate had sent more units to the eastern border, set up emergency communication plans, and prepared for different situations. The public didn't know what was happening, but rumors had started spreading among diplomats. Then, at exactly 10:17 a.m., almost 24 hours after he disappeared, Ibrahim Traoré walked through the main entrance of the presidential palace as if he was just coming back from a normal trip. He was wearing the same uniform as the day before, but it was a little dusty. His security team went back to their places without saying anything. Colonel Konate met him in the private waiting room. His relief at seeing the president alive quickly turned into worry about his job. "Mr. President, with all due respect, what happened? The whole security system has been on high alert." Traoré smoothly interrupted, "Which is exactly how it should be." "Your response was excellent, Colonel." He smiled, patting his trusted security chief on the shoulder. "Nothing to worry about. I just signed a deal that will change the world." Before Konate could ask for more details, Traoré continued toward his office. "Call the whole cabinet together in 1 hour and get the secure communications room ready. We'll need to make some calls to our regional partners right away." As the stunned colonel watched him walk away, he noticed something strange. Traoré was carrying a small metal case he hadn't had the day before, holding it very carefully, which suggested it was extremely important. Within the hour, the president's cabinet met. Their faces showed a mix of relief and confusion. Traoré walked into the room with his usual confidence, placing the metal case carefully on the conference table before talking to the officials. "I understand you've all had a worrying 24 hours, he began, speaking in a calm way. "That couldn't be avoided because of how sensitive what I'm about to share with you is." He opened the case, showing what looked like a normal tablet computer, and a small pile of papers with unfamiliar company names on them. "Yesterday, I met with Werner Kruger." The name hung in the air, causing looks of disbelief around the table. Werner Kruger was not a country leader or a known diplomat. He was the private rich founder of Quantum Resources, one of the world's biggest private mining and technology companies. It was known for its amazing ways of getting resources out of the ground and for keeping its special knowledge very secret. "Kruger has been watching our efforts to control our own resources with interest," Traoré continued. "Unlike the big international companies and the governments that support them, he sees our way of doing things as possibly good for him." He turned on the tablet, and its screen showed up on the room's main display. What appeared was a detailed map of Burkina Faso and nearby countries, showing where minerals were. But unlike any map they had seen before, it showed mineral deposits deep underground and in amounts that normal searching tools couldn't find. What you're seeing is from Quantum's special deep scanning technology, Traoré explained. Technology they've never shared with any government or public group. Finance Minister Kaber leaned forward, looking at the screen with wide eyes. These rare earth deposits, they're at least 5 times bigger than we thought. 8 times bigger, Traoré corrected. And that's just the start. He swiped to a new screen, showing a complicated drawing. This is Quantum's special system for processing minerals. It gets out 96% of the minerals, compared to the 40 to 60% that current methods get. And it doesn't harm the environment much or use a lot of energy. This was a huge deal. Such technology would completely change how much money could be made from mining, making even minerals that were too expensive to get before very valuable. It would also greatly reduce how much they depended on other countries to process their minerals. Defense Minister Zongo looked doubtful. And Kruger is giving us this technology for free? What does he want in return? A partnership, not ownership. Traoré replied, Quantum gives the technology and knowledge. We keep full control over our resources. They get a 15% fee for processing, which is much less than the 50 to 70% that traditional mining companies demand through their unfair contracts. He tapped the papers on the table. This agreement is different from anything offered to an African nation before. No political rules, no foreign military presence, no outside control, just sharing technology and fair payment for new ideas. Foreign Minister Ouedraogo asked the question everyone was thinking. Why? Why would one of the world's most powerful companies offer terms that go against the whole way Western countries have taken resources for centuries? Traoré looked thoughtful. Kruger has his reasons. He was born in Germany, but he grew up in Tanzania. His company has been kept out of African markets by the French and American companies that have always controlled mining here. And he really dislikes how Western governments have used their companies to control other countries in a new way. He paused, then added, but most importantly, he's practical. He sees where the future is going. Countries wanting to control their own resources in Africa becoming stronger. Instead of fighting this trend, he's getting ready to benefit from it. As the meaning of this amazing agreement became clear, questions burst out around the table. How would the usual Western powers react? What would putting this into action look like? Could they trust Kruger and his company? Traoré answered each concern carefully before sharing his most important news. The agreement isn't just with Burkina Faso, he explained. Kruger has offered the same terms to Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea. Together, we would form the Sahel Resource Alliance, controlling almost 60% of the world's important rare earth elements and using processing technology far better than anything our traditional partners have. The room became silent as they realized the huge political change this would cause. For many years, Western technology had been powerful because it controlled access to these important minerals. This agreement threatened to completely change that situation. This is why we had to keep it absolutely secret, Traoré concluded. If word had gotten out about the meeting, powerful groups would have immediately tried to stop it. My disappearance was a planned risk to secure our nation's future. As the cabinet meeting ended, Traoré gave clear orders. Preparing to put the agreement into action would start right away, but it would be kept top secret. The other Sahel nations would send technical teams within the week. They would announce it together once the first steps of putting it into action were far enough along that it couldn't be stopped. What Traoré didn't say, what only he and Kruger knew, was why this unlikely partnership happened. 3 months earlier, Quantum's advanced scanning technology found something that changed everything. Under the Sahel region, there weren't just rare earth elements, but what seemed to be the world's biggest supply of a very rare mineral. This mineral was vital for the next generation of quantum computing and advanced energy storage. Whoever controlled this resource would have huge power in the new technology world of the mid-21st century. In the days after Traoré's mysterious return, spy agencies worldwide tried to figure out what had happened during his absence. Satellite images were checked carefully, communications were looked at, and sources were questioned. But the meeting had been carefully planned to avoid being found, held in an old mining building whose walls blocked surveillance. 2 weeks later, sharp analysts noticed something unusual. Technical experts from Quantum Resources started arriving in Ouagadougou, and soon after, similar arrivals happened in Bamako, Niamey, and Conakry. Special equipment was moved under heavy guard. Satellite images showed new construction starting at remote places across the Sahel region. In Paris, the French foreign minister called an emergency meeting with spy officials and leaders from their main resource companies. What exactly is Traoré doing? He demanded. And why are quantum resources specialists suddenly all over the Sahel? The intelligence chief looked uncomfortable. We think some kind of technology sharing agreement has been made, but details are still unclear. Quantum has always been extremely secretive about its special systems. Whatever it is, added the CEO of France's largest mining company, it seems to be happening in many countries at once. Our local sources report very tight security around new facilities being built near major mineral deposits. Contact the Americans, the foreign minister ordered. This could threaten Western access to important materials. We need to work together to respond. But creating that response was hard. The usual ways of putting pressure on countries, like threatening to cut them off economically, raising security concerns, or causing political instability, didn't work against countries that were suddenly using technology that changed the whole resource situation. When Mali announced it was looking again at all its mining contracts with European companies, saying it had new technical abilities that completely changed how valuable things were, the pattern became clear. 1 month after he disappeared and mysteriously came back, Ibrahim Traoré spoke to his country on TV. This broadcast was also shown live across the Sahel region. Today, I am announcing the creation of the Sahel Resource Alliance, he began, standing in front of flags from Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea. This historic cooperation between our nations will change how we develop and use the natural resources our lands have been given. He explained the agreement with Quantum Resources, highlighting how special the technology transfer was and how they would keep full control over their resources. For too long, our nations have been told that we don't have the technical skills to develop our own resources, that we must accept bad deals from foreign companies who act like they are essential partners. Today, that story ends. The world reacted immediately and in a telling way. Western financial news described the alliance as causing instability and possibly harming global supply chains. Chinese state media worried about countries wanting to control their own resources while at the same time offering other ways to partner. Russian commentators praised Africa for standing up for itself against Western control. Stock prices of traditional mining companies dropped sharply as investors saw the danger to their African operations. Quantum Resources, being a private company, didn't make any public statement, but industry experts noticed the company was actively hiring specialists in rare earth processing and geology. 3 months after the Sahel Resource Alliance was formed, the first results of the new partnership could be seen. A processing plant near Ouagadougou, built very quickly using Quantum's modular technology, started producing very pure rare earth concentrates. Similar plants in partner nations followed soon after. What surprised international observers wasn't just how fast it was built, but how well it worked. The new plants achieved extraction rates that made old methods seem very basic, greatly reducing environmental harm while getting more minerals. Western mining executives, who had first thought the alliance couldn't last without their knowledge, now rushed to understand what had changed. How had 5 of Africa's poorest nations suddenly jumped ahead decades in technology? 6 months after the alliance started, Ibrahim Traoré invited some international journalists to visit the Ouagadougou processing plant. The news coverage, even though Western media tried to make it seem less important, sent shockwaves through the global resource market. "What we saw," wrote a respected technology reporter, "is nothing less than a complete change in how minerals are processed. The efficiency, environmental friendliness, and quality of what they produce are better than anything currently working in Western facilities. Most remarkably, the operations are run entirely by engineers and technicians from Burkina Faso after just a few months of training." As the economic impact of the alliance became clear, diplomatic efforts from traditional powers increased. The United States offered special trade status. France suggested a strategic development partnership. China offered investments in infrastructure that would go well with the current resource development. Traoré and his alliance partners responded politely but firmly. They welcomed fair trade relationships and partnerships that benefited everyone. But the time when outside forces controlled their resources was definitely over. 1 year after the important 24-hour disappearance that worried the world, Ibrahim Traoré stood with the leaders from Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea at the opening of the Sahel Resource Management Academy in Ouagadougou. This modern facility, paid for entirely by money from the alliance's mineral sales, would train the next generation of African engineers in advanced resource technology. When Werner Kruger joined the African leaders for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his first public appearance in years, international observers finally saw the partnership that had been formed during those missing hours. The private billionaire, who usually avoided attention, made an exception for what he called the most meaningful use of our technology to date. In his speech, Traoré thought about the changes of the past year. "When I disappeared for 1 day, many feared the worst. Some thought it was a coup. Others suspected I was killed. No one imagined that those 24 hours would instead mark the start of true resource independence for our nations." He pointed to the academy behind him, where young African students were already learning advanced technical skills. "This is the real revolution. Not just getting our minerals out more efficiently, but building the knowledge and ability to control our resources for generations to come." The Sahel Resource Alliance would still face problems: political pressure, economic competition, and threats from those whose interests were hurt. But the basic situation had changed. The technology transfer couldn't be undone. The knowledge couldn't be unlearned, and the example of successful resource control couldn't be erased. For Ibrahim Traoré, the risk he took during those missing 24 hours meeting, secretly with an unusual partner, risking international alarm and problems at home, had achieved what decades of traditional development methods had failed to deliver: a way to true economic independence built on Africa controlling its own resources. When a journalist asked if he had expected the big effects of his mysterious disappearance, Traoré smiled. Sometimes the most important changes begin with a single day. 24 hours that alter the course of history. What neither the journalist nor most of the world knew yet was that the rare earth elements being processed were just the beginning. Under the Sahel, the truly revolutionary mineral, the one that would reshape global technology in the coming decades, remained there closely guarded secret, a foundation for African technological leadership rather than just providing resources. The agreement signed during those missing 24 hours hadn't just changed the present. It had secured a future where Africa would go from being the world's resource supplier to a technology innovator itself. All because one leader had disappeared for a day and returned with a smile, saying simply, "I just signed an agreement that will change the world."